So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar from the Illinois Farmers Market Association. How does your farm display look to customers? This webinar is hosted by the University of Illinois Extension and the Illinois Farmers Market Association. My name is Lori George. I am from the University of Illinois Extension, and I will be your host for today. We appreciate you joining us, and we will do our best to begin and end within the space of your lunch hour. Questions can be added to the chat box and will be answered at the end of the presentation. What I'd like to do right now is to introduce our speakers for today. First one is Natalie. Kenny Marquez is a born planner and communicator specializing in helping organizations determine their audience, tell their story, build their brand, and expand their reach. Natalie's background includes 10 years in municipal government outreach and communications, 5 seasons running Urbanus Market at the Square, and countless hours working with small businesses and startups on their marketing plans and strategies. Janie Maxwell is the Executive Director of the Illinois Farmers Market Association and a registered dietitian. She is passionate about expanding local foods and farmers markets and believes strongly in the health value of local food and advocates for the local food by building systems that highlight the economic value of markets to communities and farmers. Generally, you can find Janie at farmers markets somewhere in Illinois or outside every week. So welcome both of you to our webinar. Janie, I'll let you go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you to everyone who's joining us today. The Illinois Farmers Market Association is very pleased to present these webinars in partnership with the University of Illinois Extension. So just a little bit about the Illinois Farmers Market Association. We do support local food and food systems, and we're trying to give Illinois farmers markets and producers access to resources, education, and connections so that we can all work together to grow healthier communities. Next. So I'll let Natalie start with the presentation.
Awesome, thanks Jamie. So we're gonna go through quite a few things today, but our primary goals are to talk about ways that you can dress for success is what we called it, or discover ways that you can create a more visible and accessible display. We'll talk about growth, trends and opportunities, and how you can get your display market ready, and then talk about a plan of action for your farm display. So we'll move on to the next slide. We'll begin by talking about the basic anatomy of a display. That's signage, that's levels that you create within your booth or tent area, and as well as decor. Signage is very important because it's necessary, A, for market staff when they go through and they do attendance or check on what vendors are there and want to come talk to vendors, but it's also really important, and even maybe possibly more so for the consumer, to know what the name of your farm is or the name of your business. It needs to be easy to read and easy to see. It's usually higher up, talking about depths and levels. It's usually situated somewhere that's higher up and easier to see. Things that are lower down for signage with text, it's a little bit harder to see. I know when I was at Urbanus Market at the Square, we had a signage program where we required everyone to have a sign, but we also helped them to make the signs. We had vinyl signs. We would sit down with each vendor, help them make their sign, and have it printed that way that there was some consistency in signage at our farmers market. And the vendors got to take it with them. It wasn't like something they had to keep at Urbana. That way they had great signage no matter where they went. It helped them with their business. Talking a little bit about depths and levels, I've seen some pretty awesome farm displays that are both vertical and horizontal in how they display items. We all know that there is some concern for wind and elements when you start moving things vertically, but if you have them well anchored down and they're sturdy, kind of like these displays that we see here on the screen, the wooden crates. They'll withstand a few elements. And it's important to keep things off the ground. Although we see here there's some baskets maybe on the ground, but it also kind of looks like they're on the stand. But keeping things off the ground, because there could be rainwater. If you're at a market that allows dogs or pets, there could be other things on the ground. So keeping food off the ground is really important. And as far as decor goes, we'll talk a little bit about this more further on in the presentation. But branding, that goes back to signage, and using your display as a marketing opportunity. People will recognize certain color schemes and certain ways that you arrange things week after week, and that's great for branding your business. Next slide, please. So we talked about, I teased into talking about using your stand as a marketing tool. You definitely can do that in the way that you arrange things. You can see here on this slide, things are arranged in a really bright and visible way. They're well stocked, they're well labeled, well, at least for the most part anyway. It looks like it's accessible. It's at a level where people can come right up to it and reach for things easily. It's off the ground. It's unique in that, you know, they're using baskets as opposed to just laying things flat on a table. It's clean and tidy. Things are organized nicely into these baskets and separated from one another. It looks like they're keeping them full, which is awesome because it shows abundance, and people like abundance. Think about going to a grocery store. They're always stocked all the time, and there's always someone stocking them, and people are accustomed to that, and they, whether or not they realize there's a difference between farmers markets and grocery stores, they carry that kind of subconscious thinking with them to the farmers market. And making sure your booth is always staffed. I know that might sound kind of silly that we have to call that out, but I've been to markets before where the person isn't there. I mean, I'm sure we all know you might have to, if you're there by yourself and you need to quickly take a break or grab a drink of water or find the restroom, I understand, but having some kind of backup or someone that can help, that's happy and they're helpful and they're engaging with the customers is all part of your marketing. That customer service definitely ties into your brand. Janie, is there anything that you want to add to this?
No, except, well, maybe just in that customers do shop with their eyes. And again, we all, whether you're a producer or maybe you're a farmer's market manager, this is our arena. This is where we feel comfortable. And we take a lot for granted. It's really important maybe to go visit another market or some other place where you don't typically go. And I think then you'll see the difference between what you take for granted and what you see in a new and different place. Because our consumers are not as well educated as we like. And part of the display is trying to make sure that they understand the difference between what they're seeing here at the farmer's market versus what they might see in a conventional grocery store.
All right, I think we can move to the next slide. We've touched upon a few of these things that it's important to keep in mind, but it's always good to go over it again and again. Understanding before you get to the market what the size of your booth is and the size of the space that you have to work with, and making sure that the tent that you plan to use fits in that space that you're given. I go back to when I worked at the farmers market in Urbana, everybody used 10-foot tents, 10 by 10 tents, which is a pretty normal size of pop-up tent. But we were in a parking lot, and the way the parking stalls were drawn out, the stalls were 9 3/4 of a foot wide, but we allowed people to use 10-foot tents. So what does that mean? That means that it could get really crowded, and we would try to accommodate an open space to give some wiggle room, but oftentimes tent legs had to touch each other or maybe even overlap just a little bit. And so it was important to know what space you had to work with based on your tent size, and knowing which direction the sun was going to hit in the morning as compared in the afternoon, as compared in the evening as the sun sets. What time of day is your market? Where is the sun going to be? Keeping tabs on weather and wind And is it going to be shady to where things get really cool when the sun sets? All those things are great to know. Maybe go out to the location where your market's going to take place at the time of day when you would be there for market, and just see, like, stand in your space if you are pre-assigned to something, to a space at the market, and just kind of check it out a little bit. That way you're prepared. You'll know exactly how to arrange your booth space to take advantage of what assets you have there to take advantage of. I skipped over tent weights, which is probably the most important thing to keep in mind. Obviously, in this illustration, there's 2 measly tent weights on here from what we can see, and there's 4 tent legs. So if I were the market manager, I would say get more weight, because there's never too much tent weight that you can use. I actually saw a picture of a new vendor at a market in downstate Illinois. They posted a picture of their tent, and the market shared it, and the tent didn't have any weights on it. It was a beautiful, brand new branded tent. It had sidewalls, which to me are wind sails. Beautiful, but they'll help the tent take flight if there is a gust of wind. And I didn't see any weights on any of the legs. That makes me really nervous, and I'm not even involved in that market. So don't overestimate the power of the wind, and always have some really great weights for your tents. It's also important, and I'm just going to touch quickly on this, neighbors, vehicles, and loading in and loading out. Your neighbors are loading in and loading out the same time that you are. All of your vehicles will be either in the market parked with you, or coming in and out of the market at load in and load out, and making friends with one another, helping one another, making the process go efficiently is helpful for everybody. The market is a place of community, and it's important to remember that part when you load in and load out. I think we're ready for the next slide. So going back to signage really quickly, we talked about knowing what the name of your business is and having that on the sign, but there's also opportunities within your booth for other types of signage, like pricing and product name. Knowing how to arrange it is helpful. Making it clear and legible is helpful. Giving an explanation of where the product is from and how it's grown, or even what it is. There's a lot of times you'll have people that are new to the market that may have never seen a product that you're growing, or a variation of the product that you're growing. It might look different than what they're used to. Tomatoes are a great example of that. People might not recognize more of the unique or heirloom varieties as compared to just the round red ones they see in the grocery store. So take advantage of those opportunities as a place of education, and also to explain what to do with it when they get home, how it was grown, why it's different than things that they're used to, but why it's going to be better than things that they're used to. It's great to promote if you accept link and wick at your tent. That is another source of marketing and an opportunity to recruit more customers to your booth. And don't hide anything, because nobody will see it if it's tucked away or hidden around. Put everything out there for everyone to see. And brand your signage. On this example, there isn't any branding on the signage, but the signage is very visible. It's easy to read, and it's easy to understand. When I say branding signage, that could be your logo in the corner of every sign or something like that. Actually, it looks like maybe those signs are pretty simple pieces of wood that had been painted with chalkboard paint, and then they probably wash them off at the end of market and then put it back up the next week. That's a pretty simple way to do it. There is some pricing on there, and I don't want to miss the chance to invite Janie to give some feedback on pricing, because there's some great ways to to be able to educate on pricing, and use that as an opportunity to educate pricing at market versus pricing at grocery store.
Yeah, again, just remember that your primary customer is familiar with a grocery store. And very often I hear from customers at markets that farmers markets are just too expensive. And on further exploration and conversation, I think that's often because of how items are priced. Now here you can see that the garlic is by the piece. That probably makes some sense. But over on the side, the onions, very often people are not used to buying by the basket or whatever, because they don't know how big that is. So if your basket of onions, or maybe it's peaches or apples, is $7, people look at that and their context is that's per pound. That must be what's in that basket. And I just recently was at a farmer's market and was so pleased to see that the farmer had actually taken a special sign, put it out front, and said that it averaged out her apples to $1.79 a pound, because that's the context that your customer has. So just think about it through the customer's eyes. Like, you look at that bag of lettuce, how much is that? How much does it weigh? That is the context that your customer has. So if you can think of ways to educate your customer, maybe even just putting out, what does a pound of fruit or a pound of tomatoes look like? So they get that understanding that when they pay $5 or $7 for a basket, that they're getting, maybe it's a pound, but maybe it's quite a bit more than that. So just think from the consumer point of view, what they see, not what's convenient for you, particularly as you're selling the product.
Awesome, thank you. All right, I think we're ready for the next slide, which is, I want to open it up for folks that are on the webinar today to provide some feedback. So we're going to show a couple of slides here. We'll have a series of 3 slides. And I thought it would give us a chance to kind of engage with one another and talk about some of the things that we see that we think are good for the display, or that they could work on, or just some general feedback on what you see in this display. And like I said before, or maybe we didn't say, but we're trying to use displays that we found from other places, so we wouldn't be picking on any of our friends here at Illinois markets. So if you want to chime in, you can, or if I think chiming in might be the best way. Yep.
So I have all of the attendees are unmuted. If you've muted yourself, feel free to unmute. Voice any questions, concerns, or comments.
I could start us by saying they have a good sign. I mean, at least it says who they are, and it's easy to see as someone walks by. And the sign looks like it also doubles as a sunshade.
I like the curtains in the back. They kind of give depth and a little bit more pizzazz to the stand.
And their color, they match the color of the tablecloths and the color of the packaging. Everything is branded really well.
I like the way that they turned the table so that it feels inviting to walk in and maybe look and explore their product a little bit more.
What about the stand in the front? You can kind of see it. It's black with the 3 hanging baskets. I call that out because it reminds me of an end cap at a grocery store, where maybe you're walking by and it catches your attention, so it kind of pulls you in, or it gives you a chance to display a group of things in a way that's not on your actual real estate of your table. It's kind of upfront, a good use of more space, taking advantage of more space. Is there anyone that has concerns about how this will withstand wind?
I'd be concerned that the tent would take off, but that's just because it has an opening, but then it's under the tree, so it's got a lot of shade, so maybe it's a little bit more protected.
Right. That's why I think, going back to the point I made of knowing in advance the space that you're going to occupy and what you have to work with, and building your display around that would be really helpful to know. One last thing I would point out about this stand is that at their register or cash box, back there in kind of the center right under the sign, it says valid here. Although we can't see what is valid, my assumption is it tells you whether it's cash or check or SNAP or WIC or tokens or whatever they have. I don't know what it's saying, but at least it tells you up front what form of payment that booth will take. I like.
Go ahead.
All right. This is not a traditional farmer's market. It looks like more of a grocery store or a big farm stand or farm store. But I like to show this because it helps to think outside of the box, no pun intended, by putting things in boxes. It's a unique way of displaying items vertically, but it looks sturdy. It gives a chance to describe the product. It looks like the pricing is pretty small in the corner, but it still puts that up there. It looks like maybe the asparagus is missing its signage, but maybe that's what that guy's gonna do. He's gonna write it. That's what I'm gonna say. Any other, anyone else want to give any feedback on this display? All right, if not, we can move on to the next example. It's kind of a 3-in-1 here. I pulled these because I think that they're fun things to look at and good opportunities for discussion on ways to put your products out there. On the left-hand side, we have what looks like a cute display that someone built for grab-and-go flowers. This is another example of one of those end cap style displays where you walk by, it grabs your attention, you see, oh, $5 for fresh cut flowers. It looks like they can just pull the bunch right there and get it wrapped up and go. Whether it's intentional or not, it could be an impulse buy of like, oh, that's cute, $5, it's already bundled together. Those types of things help move product, and it's easy to read and visible. In the middle, I like this example because how often do you see peaches and pears displayed on a dresser? It's just another way to show ways that you can display your product. It's eye-catching, it's unique. I would definitely stop and look at a dresser display for fruit and then read more about it. Signage is good. I'd love to know what the little sign in the middle between the two fruits says, but I think in the past when I had given this example to a group, I said at our market, we didn't have anyone that sold furniture necessarily, but what if you're to have somebody on your team that refinishes furniture? This could be kind of a sly way to show your furniture at the market. Even though you can't sell it there, it could still market it and hold your fruits to display at market. Not that I suggest anyone skirt the rules, but I'm just thinking out loud here from a marketer's perspective. And then we have the vendor on the far right who has a lot of beautiful colors and it's all displayed really nicely, but it's missing a couple of key things. Anyone want to call those out?
Pricing.
I was going to say, I think Janie will be the first one to say pricing. Pricing is a great thing to have on everything. And I also don't think it would be a bad idea to put the names of the products on there. Obviously, there's some pretty easy to identify fruits and vegetables up there, but not everybody has seen carrots in other colors. Or maybe people don't know what kind of squash those are. Or even what to do with certain vegetables. Having little recipe cards set next to some of the items. Those are all good things to think of. But I love this photo because it shows color, it shows depth, and it shows abundance. All things that are important for a successful farmer's market display. All right, well, I think we can move to the next slide. So when you're thinking about your display, it's important to keep a few things in mind when you're planning everything out, and that every move you make in your display should be intentional. It should build upon the story that you're trying to tell to your customers. It's something that's unique, it's authentic to you. It describes your business and your mission, and hopefully demonstrates why you do what you do and sets you apart from other people that are doing similar things at the market. It's an opportunity for you to establish your brand, to build your brand, and to own it, to encourage people to come back week to week because they remember your display based on the way you showcase your product, your signage, your big signs, your little signs, your customer service, your engaging and friendly staff that are at the booth, and all of those support the quality product that you are trying to sell at market. And there are some other ways beyond a typical display that we can think about encouraging customers to come back week to week, and that's in the next slide, which is ways to appeal to a broader audience, specifically millennials. So I'm going to hand this over to Janie because she's done some research on this.
Yeah, millennials are an interesting group, especially if we want to consider how do we get millennials to the farmers market and get them interested in preparing and purchasing local food. It's interesting, some of my students at Northern Illinois University, when I was teaching there, did some research with the student population at NIU and asked them about their experiences with farmers markets and whether you know, they shop farmers markets or if they would like to shop farmers markets. Well, number one is they prefer local food. A lot of our millennials are very interested in what goes into their food and the story of local food and how something is produced and the care that a farmer producer takes to make sure that that product is produced well and safely and is full of food flavor is something that millennials are very much attracted to. They, however, are not quite sure how to cook. I don't know whether it's the generation before them that didn't do a lot of cooking, but our millennial population isn't quite sure how to cook. So that's, again, going back to one of the things Natalie said, is how are you helping your population that purchases from you make your product? Do you have recipe cards? Do you have links to other people that have recipes for the products that you make? For example, the Illinois Farmers Market Association submits a monthly recipe based on local food that is available seasonally to Natural Awakening Chicago. And so you don't have to develop a recipe. You could just put a link to our publication that shows, like, the July issue was on blueberries and a recipe for that. So you can use other people's recipes without having to actually do that yourself. A lot of times millennials will need education so that they need to understand the benefits of how you produce your food. You know, for example, at the market on Saturday, a woman was holding a bag of greens and she's like, oh, I don't know, these aren't going to last very long, are they? And the farmer said, I cut them yesterday. They'll probably last you 7 to 10 days and be fine. And so our audience just isn't familiar with buying local food as opposed to grocery store food. But again, the caveat is this population is technology dependent. They said that if they couldn't find a farmer's market on their phone or information about a farmer's market on their phone, they weren't going to go. So we do actually have, through the Illinois Farmers Market Association, what's called the What's in Season app. It's downloadable from the from one of the pages on our website, www.ilfma.org. And it is a map of the farmers markets, and then it links you to information about the specific markets, as much information as the market has actually put into the system. This population doesn't use cash. They're cash poor. They use all sorts of crazy ways to pay, and maybe not even traditional ways. So we need to make sure that we're up to date with, at the very minimum, providing the opportunity for credit purchases at the market. Some people are actually experimenting with some more different, more cutting edge ways to take payment from someone at the market, but at least trying to provide a basic credit transaction would be really, really helpful. They want convenience, and they're very experience driven. They want the farmers market to be a really fun thing. They want it to be engaging. They want to have conversations with producers, and they want to learn from other people that are there. Now, under the demand convenience, you know, we can't necessarily provide convenience foods like other outlets do, but with the expanded cottage food law, and we'll talk about that next month, you may be able to actually provide some convenience type items at your booth to sell at a farmer's market. So I highly recommend that you join us next month to see if there aren't some other products that you could potentially sell that are a little bit more convenient. Maybe it is as simple as doing the recipe thing, but at a market that I was at this summer, they actually had taken their onions and their carrots and peppers and pre-diced them and sold them ready to go. So that was all appropriate under the health code and the way that those things were produced. But it was kind of a next level. It's like, well, you can get this maybe someplace else, but you can also buy it directly from us, and it was just prepared yesterday. So do think about the millennials. We want them to come to the markets. We want them to be interested. We want them to fall in love with local food, because that is already the way they're leaning. We just have to make it easy for them. Natalie?
Awesome. All right, let's move to the next slide. And just in case you wanted a recap of where you can go to get the app, the info is listed here. And if you are a vendor and want to be involved, go to our website to learn more. Okay, next slide, please. So we have talked about some ways that you can work on your display. We've talked about some ways that you can make your display more engaging and to incorporate some two-way communication and some engagement with some new audiences at your display as well. Those are great ways to get to know your shoppers better, especially to build, I'm going to skip around on here, to build brand ambassadors, people that come back week to week that represent your business on social media, in their friends groups, by word of mouth. These are the people that sing your praises and share photos of your food and your products. These are people to keep tabs on, to talk to, ask questions, make them feel as if they're part of your your business, they'll love that. They'll love the opportunity to try a new product or give you feedback. I've even known vendors that would give these types of people a little something extra and say, hey, this is a new product that we're trying out. I'm going to give you a couple of these. I'd love to know next week what you thought about it. How did it taste? What'd you do with them? Because we're looking to put some recipes together. Maybe if you come up with a good recipe, we'll share it with your name on it. These types of people would love to be involved with your business like this. And it doesn't cost a whole lot of money to give a little bit of product or a little bit of extra here and there to keep that engagement and help them to promote your business. Going back to market managers, working with your farmer's market manager, letting them know each week, like, what are some new things that you're planning to bring? Do you have a special going on that week? Are you collaborating with other vendors? Do you have an on-farm event? Are you giving food to a farm-to-table fundraiser? Letting them know what's going on gives them things to talk about. And as a former market manager, I loved hearing from my vendors on what they're doing and where they're going and what they're selling. It helped me to better sell them. And that's important for the overall success of the farmer's market. Using social media to do this is a great way to promote in a cost-effective way. Social media isn't expensive, and our farmers market vendors have beautiful things to photograph. Whether you're using Instagram or Facebook or other means of communication on social media, it's a great opportunity to keep engaged with your customers on non-market days, get them excited for things coming up, and to share what you're doing. People want to know your story, and it helps to build your authenticity, and it helps to build your brand. And I kind of alluded to working with other vendors, but work with other vendors, find ways to collaborate. If you sell I keep talking about tomatoes, but if you sell some amazing tomatoes and some amazing herbs, and then maybe across the aisle from you is a meat vendor, and then maybe there's someone that makes scratch-made pastas, well, work together to put a recipe card up that pulls the best from each of your booths to put together a really awesome recipe. Or better yet, maybe even put a little meal kit together that's grab and go, and people can have the best of your 3 booths in one easy to make meal. There's so many opportunities for collaboration, and I love seeing market vendors collaborate. I think as customers, it shows friendliness and opportunity, and it just builds on the fact that the farmers market is a place, not only a gathering place, but a place of community. Do you have any thing you want to add to that, Janie?
I just think this is a tremendous opportunity to work together. And even as you look at a market as a whole, how does it look, and what is the face that's going forward? One of the questions I always like to ask that is good for your social media is, what is unique about the market this coming week? And seeing if you can't get something from producers, vendors to let you know that is just key, because why come to the market if in fact there isn't anything unique or special drawing you there? And I don't think we mentioned it, but in this day and age of social media and phone distraction, just really key to be very engaged with the customers that are there and present. I have had sleeping vendors wonder why they didn't sell very much at their market, but I'm not really quite sure what I would say to them. But when you sleep during your market, you're probably not going to have record sales. Or if you have people that are on their phones or would rather not engage, sitting back, instead of going out and kind of asking people to come and look at your display and to interact with your product, and you are the best marketer that you have. And if you put yourself out there, I think you'll see that there's an increase in the customer base. Again, the people that are familiar with you and your market are probably most likely to come week to week. But every single week, there's somebody that hasn't been to a market at all, or this is the first time to this particular market. And it's really our job to be the ambassador that draws them in, that makes them say at the end, oh, I have to come back next week.
Perfect. All right, let's move on to the next slide. So something that we wanted to include is kind of a checklist of things that you can go through to help you evaluate your strategy in terms of putting a good display together, and also some salesmanship and ongoing things that you can think of throughout the planning process and course of the market season. This is something that we sourced from the internet, and credit is shown on the worksheet, but it's great. It shows you ideas for design and signage. We talked a lot about signage and product signage, thinking about your displays, reminding your sales staff, if it's more than you, about salesmanship and good customer service, and ways that you can continue to build upon these efforts on an ongoing basis throughout the market season. All right, let's move on to the next slide. So we're coming to the end of our presentation, and I want to quickly summarize some of the things that we talked about over the course of the presentation. We talked about getting your display ready for the market season, or maybe an upgrade, or reevaluating the way that you dress for success, how you put your display together, thinking about opportunities to bring some products forward, to highlight some things, and taking advantage of some trends and opportunities, whether it be with the millennial population, whether it be with opportunities for better branding or better telling your story. And altogether, just putting a plan together. Sit down, make a plan for how you're going to work on your booth display. Take a field trip to where the market is, locate your space number, know what your surroundings are like, and really hone in on a strategy to better display the items to customers. All right, last slide. So thank you. I appreciate you listening in today and tuning in to our presentation about farmers market displays. I know Janie and I are always available to answer questions, and you can learn more about farmers markets at our website, as well as Connect Fresh and the What's in Season app at ilfma.org.
Okay. For those that are out there, our attendees, if you have any questions, I will go ahead and unmute you, or you can go ahead and put your questions in the chat box, either way, and we can answer those. While we're waiting on that, I did want to say one thing that I find when I go to farmers markets and talk with the vendors. When you're talking about branding and putting your name out there, I've always found that every time I talk to a vendor and ask for a business card, they never have one. They don't have any information that they can give to me that I can take home. That's going to be a very important part of being able to market your farm and your name, especially if I like the product and I don't know who I bought it from. So that may be something, whether you make a little business card, those are very easy to do if you have a computer. Maybe making a small, half-page flyer with your logo on it and some farm information and what you're selling and maybe where you sell at, and put it in everybody's bag when they leave, so they have something that they're taking home with them.
I love that. Thank you.
Those are great points.
I don't see anything in the chat box at this time. Anything else that the two of you want to mention real quick? Jeannie or Natalie?
Do you have the slide of the upcoming? There we go.
Yes. That's my last one, is that we do have a full course of webinars coming up between now and March. And so this is, again, going to be a joint venture between the Illinois Farmers Market Association and the University of Illinois Extension. So these are the dates. Every webinar is going to be at noon, from noon to 1. So it's kind of like a lunch and learn type of thing. And up on the top in blue is where you can register for those webinars. Again, when I send out the link for the talk today, for the presentation, I will also include the link for these webinars so you can register for them. Sign up for all of them or just one or two, whichever interests you. Once you sign up, then I will send the link the Friday before the webinar so you can have a way to sign in on that. So, any other questions or concerns from the attendees or comments that you want to mention? You are unmuted. Okay, hearing nothing, what I'd like to do is to thank our presenters, Natalie and Janie, for the great presentation and sharing their expertise on this topic. I'd also like to thank everyone for joining us. And I hope you enjoyed the webinar today and were able to obtain some information that you'll be able to use for your next growing season. Again, please look for an email from me with a link to the archived webinar, which will be posted at the Illinois Farmers Market Association website and the Illinois Local Foods YouTube channel. Not seeing anything else, I'd like to thank everyone, and I wish you a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.
You.